Welcome to Insight into Iceland for day 7 of the Mid-Season Invitational 2021. So this is the first day of the Rumble stage, which is the part of the tournament that maps onto what used to be called the group stage at MSI. We've got 6 teams in the tournament. We've got North America, Europe, South Korea. We've got the LPL represented. We also have the PCS team, and then the team from Oceania that qualified through. So, if you map this onto previous versions of the tournament, we would have just had 4 or 5 of those teams auto-qualified in, and then one team coming out of the international wildcard qualifier, or whatever you want to call it. But, however they got here, we ended up with more or less the same thing as a previous structure. This is what, if you want to make historical comparisons, this is the group stage. But here we are. Rumble stage, we started off with the first 6 games. Started off with, coming into the tournament, the 2 favorites, Damon Kia against RNG, or game 1 today. Damon got an early lead. They were playing Sion, Udyr, Lucian, Tristana set. So with the Lucian on a mid and the pacing from the Udyr, they got into an early lead. They focused the bottom side of the map, away from the Sion. They got the first Dragon. They got the first Herald. They were in a decent position. But RNG managed to make a comeback. Their comp was Gragas, Olaf, Orianna, Kai'Sa, Nautilus. Some really, really good 5v5 power, different people who can deliver the Orianna ball for the ultimates. And I think Damon had a good chance to remain in control of this game. They had a lot of tempo that they were running around the map with, controlling the dragon spawns. But the thing that really kind of stood out to me from Damon was how slow they were in moving onto those dragons and actually starting them, and they would be very cautious in the river setting it up, and that led to RNG being able to react in time to actually take the fights. Dragon might have been alive for 20 or 30 seconds, and Damwon were in control of the river that entire time, and they didn't actually go for it. It seemed like they wanted the fights because they didn't want to let RNG scale up enough to leverage kind of their 5v5 power, something like that. So maybe I'm just assuming or guessing that maybe they wanted the fights to happen around the dragons and they were expecting RNG to approach kind of more recklessly or something like that. I don't know. It was some very strange dragon setups, and Damon got punished for it. Xiaohu made some great plays with the Gragas engages. They got a sequence of fights that led to a Baron take eventually with one of the dragon fights that kind of snowballed into that, and RNG took over the game and won from there. So I think in certain ways it felt close, but I thought RNG did play it decently better. But Damwon did put themselves in some decent positions. Game 2, we had Mad Lions taking on Pentanet. Not a whole lot to say about this game. I don't think we're going to have a lot to say about Pentanet's games in general, unless they pull off some really impressive things. But Mad Lions just won it through the bot lane. They were playing a Vayne Leona lane, and Karzi and Kaiser kind of won the game through lane and rotated themselves all around the map, and it was pretty chaotic. There were some fights back and forth, and it seemed like the teams were having a bit of fun with it, but the Vayne was too far ahead, and you were never going to, very unlikely you were going to get a real game out of that one with how far ahead they got in their 2v2 fighting in the bottom lane. Game 3, PSG Talon took on Damwon. Canyon again was pathing to control the bottom side of the map. Damwon drafted Sion again. Sion, Morgana, Silas, Kai'Sa, Leona. I think these Sion comps that they're doing, I'm not sure if they're fitting all together cohesively. There was some individual mistake kind of component to this game for Damwon. Beryl had a really bad kind of into the mid lane. I thought Damwon in their dragon control were a little lucky to come out with the dragon secured in a couple of times. Around the second dragon, I'm pretty sure it was, their Kai Wing, I think, approached poorly and got caught face checking. And Damwon probably shouldn't have had that dragon based on what had been happening up to there. But eventually Damwon did manage to win a really decisive dragon fight that led them into a Baron, which led into a mid inhibitor, and that kind of closed out the game. But Damwon, I think, should have been able to be in a lot better control of this game, and playing this game as closely as it did was not a great look for them. So I'll have a few more comments on Damwon in general. I think you've gotten the gist of what I'm saying here, but just to wrap up kind of the recaps here with a little bit more, RNG C9. This was a game where, Wei was really camping the top lane. RNG drafted Lucian, and C9 responded with a Malphite. And so Xiaohu was really bullying that matchup, as he should. and Wei camped it. He went straight from a single quadrant clear into diving the top lane, getting first blood. That control, he redove a little bit later. They got the first Herald. They used that on the top side. And the key part of the game, I think, was really after getting the first Herald, Cloud9 then got some mid and bot lane priority, and they rotated kind of that 4-man group on the bottom half of the map to take the first dragon. And RNG immediately responded to this by moving topside with the Herald, which they had already secured, and it was sitting on Wei already. And they used it on the top lane. Xiaohu had already been chipping that turret down, so they got the first turret, and Cloud9 had spent so much of their tempo on the dragon that they weren't able to respond to that top lane push, so the top inner turret went down as well. And this was really disastrous for Cloud9, that they didn't respond to this macro push, that they thought taking that dragon was more important than defending the top lane. And even if defending the top lane, they might have still allowed the first turret to go down, but it probably would have taken a little more time and effort and tempo spend from RNG to do it, and they wouldn't have gotten the inner turret from it. And so the consequence of this, and I think it's worth, just while I'm talking about it, I'll go into a little deeper. The consequence of this, giving up both of those turrets in the top lane, now Fudge was put in a position where he couldn't safely walk up the lane at all. He wanted to pull the waves in, and he was kind of standing just outside of his inhibitor turret farming these waves up, which meant, fair enough, like Fudge couldn't be attacked, right? His Malphite was getting to farm. But what RNG did with that map control of their minions being able to push all the way to inhibitors over and over again is they rotated Xiaohu into the jungle. They spent the next several minutes kind of controlling Cloud9's topside jungle and then 5v4ing the mid and bot lanes. So they were able to take the bottom outer turret. They were able to work on the mid outer turret. And it took them some time, but they got the mid outer turret as well with a little bit of skirmishing back and forth. And now that they had those turrets, now they had even that much more of the map under their control because their minion waves get to push so much further up. And so getting both of those turrets in the top lane, like Cloud9 got a dragon for it, which they had a comp that wanted to 5v5 and scale up, and dragons can be helpful for that. But if Cloud9 had slowed the game down and played a little more defensively to the top side and not allowed Fudge to give up so much of the map there, they would have been in a much better position to slow the game down, scale up more. And even they might end up losing the first dragon and RNG might get it. But Cloud9 had the scaling comp that would be able to come in and contest the third or the fourth dragons and be much more ready to fight for them by then. So I really think they misprioritized their macro here, and it was a big issue, and that was one of my big takeaways from the day because that has been a recurring issue with Cloud9 is giving away too much of the top side of the map, which you can sometimes blame Fudge's laning for to some extent, but it's also just, either it seems like Cloud9 either play really hard for Fudge with Blabber ganking over and over again and Fudge setting up the waves for those ganks, or they just leave Fudge completely alone and allow the enemy team to attack him really hard and earn a lot more from those attacks than they should. So I think there were some issues here, and that was kind of the story of that game. There was a lot more interest to that game afterwards, and as a matter of fact, there was... later in the game, C9 managed to pull out this ace with Fudge having some good team fighting on the Malphite, Perks making some plays. I'd have to go back and rewatch those team fights. I haven't had a chance to do that, but I'm sure Vulcan's Rel was making some big differences in those as well. But C9 did get an ace, and they were pulling themselves back into the game. But then finally they went for a Baron call that they were trying to force. They couldn't match Xiaohu's Lucian in the side lanes, and so they went for Baron and said, hey, this is one way to respond to a split pusher that we can't match 1v1 is you go at Baron or some other neutral setup, and then they have to respond to you. But Xiaohu didn't respond. He just kept pushing. He had so much pace in that side lane that he was already hitting the inhibitor when Cloud9 started the Baron, and RNG just used that pressure to backdoor with Cryan's TP and with Gala leaning out of the Baron contest and leaving Wei and Ming behind to stall the recalls, and RNG won off of that backdoor. So, I think people will remember this game for the backdoor. They'll remember it for the Cloud9 near comeback, but it should really be remembered for the way Cloud9 prioritized Dragon over defending the top lane and what that gave up. Because the amount of strength that Lucian had to shove that side lane so hard and put on that pressure came from the earlier sequence of macro. So moving on, Game 5, we had PSG Talent against Pentanet. PSG in a bit of a fun game again. Pentanet drafted Zed, but weren't really in this game, unfortunately. So PSG just kind of rolled through them. And then the rolliest game of the day, Cloud9 Mad Lions. C9 had an interesting plan with a Rumble Jungle and a Kindred mid. And you could tell they had very specific plans on how they were going to play for the Scuttle Crabs. And it worked out to get the bottom Scuttle Crab. Blabber skipped his Krugs after clearing top to bottom on the blue side. They contested, Sven and Vulcan contested the wave really hard with a big trade that I think they even slightly lost that trade, but it gave them control of the lane so they could help out and take that crab. And then C9 rotated up into the top river to contest that crab. I think there are valid criticisms of the way C9 executed that fight and whether or not they could have won the 3v3. I look at it and I see Silas, Udi, or Lucian again on the Mad Lions side against Scion, Rumble, Kindred. And sure, C9 might have been able to win this skirmish, but I think Mad Lions had a compositional advantage at that point of the game, 4 minutes in, fighting for a Scuttle Crab. From what I remember, Fudge started it out by standing in bush and channeling a Scion Q that Mad Lions just didn't walk into. Unlucky there, I guess, or Mad Lions being smart about expecting it to be channeled on them. But the net effect of that skirmish was that Elyoya's Udyr got a triple kill, and the game was over. That was much too big of a deficit for Cloud9 to come back from, unless Mad Lions threw harder than you've ever seen anyone throw in your life. That Udyr had such a lead, so much pace, and could just attack any part of the map, and that's exactly what he did. So the rest of the game was irrelevant. That top crab skirmish kind of decided it, and that's unfortunately a trend for Cloud9 at this tournament so far. Is the way they're playing out their first clears, something goes wrong, and the game is kind of over. And we've seen that they are able to play out the mid and late game pretty well, but they just have such big deficits that it's proving really, really difficult. So I don't think you need to completely despair about Cloud9 based on this game, because you take away that skirmish and that game could go entirely differently. But it was a big problem. And that's how that one went. So, I've talked about the Cloud9 point. I think I've talked about Damon a bit as well. But, if you look at the written version of the recap on the site, I talk about Damon kind of being in hot water with the way they played today. And I think they need to show up a lot better tomorrow, and show a lot more decisive play, use their tempo better, set up their dragons a lot better, and maybe even learn to play to the top side a little bit, and not just rely on the Scion comfort pick. I think otherwise we're going to see them fall out of contention for even being, a finals quality team. Because I think Mad Lions so far have looked better than Damwon based on today and based on, honestly, based on Damwon's group stage, which I wasn't too down on because it was, just the first stage of the tournament. I thought they were playing fairly loose and not, not try-harding that much, testing out some things. And so I gave them some leeway, but based on how they played today, I think that leeway is pretty much been used up. And I also want to shout out Jahu, who I did already a little bit. I think his Gragas playmaking was, I think, the most decisive factor against Damwon. His laning on Lucian created that turret chip damage and the pressure point that RNG were able to use to explode that game against Cloud9. So huge credit to him. I think he was by far the best player on the day. Looking forward to watching a lot more of him. So those are my thoughts on day one of the Rumble stage. We'll be back tomorrow for another set of games. As an NA fan, hopefully we've got some good news to talk about with Cloud9. I should check out who they're playing up against tomorrow. It's going to be Damwon and PSG. So, PSG are no pushovers. And Cloud9 have beaten Damwon before, and Damwon's not looking great. So it could go either way. They could go 2-0. They could go 0-2 on this day. They'll get their Pentanet game after that if they really need the, and hopefully they're able to restore some confidence from that game. But maybe Pentanet will go for their first win there. We'll see what happens with that. I think Mad Lions and RNG can feel good about them. Cloud9 Damwon not so great. PSG again starting to have some decent showings, but I'm not. If they keep playing at that level and C9 doesn't fix it, maybe they do overtake C9. We'll have to find out. See you again tomorrow for some thoughts on day 8, and thanks for watching today.